Test, 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 test.
Hello, Dumpling.
Hey, nudes. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us. I think this is going to be a great space.
It's gonna be short and sweet. Hi, Jenny. Hi, Terry. Moonfly. Crypto Junk. Familiar faces. And welcome, new guys. Edwin, Nepolis, DS9, and Mu. Welcome. I need the AI greetings bag. I need to nudge Cardano Army. Give me that AI robotic greetings. We're just getting started in the space, waiting for Sebastien to join. In the meanwhile, just grab some water and tea and coffee. Stay hydrated. Hey, Patrick. Thanks for joining. Wow, nudes. We have waffles in the space. Getting nervous now.
It's a really good culinary collection, I have to say. Spicy kitchen today.
We're talking about Milkomeda today. So, guys, if you have any questions about using the bridge or a question about Milkomeda, you better be prepared. We have Sebastien. Welcome, Sebastien. Thanks for joining. Right, we can get started then. We only have 45 minutes. We need to make efficient use of this time. Sebastien, first and foremost, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's Thursday, but feels like Friday and Saturday for some reason. I guess that's just crypto for you. Guys, welcome back to the Dumpling Space. Today we have a special episode with one of the most important builders on Cardano and for Cardano, Sebastien from dcSpark and Milkomeda. Today's theme, we are going to be focusing on Milkomeda. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. We only have 45 minutes, so we need to be efficient. To that end, I suggest that we do the space with the following agenda. I'm going to open with some questions that I gathered last night from my audience. They have some specific questions about Milkomeda. This is going to last about 10-15 minutes, and then the floor will be open for you to add comments, questions, and suggestions even. So 10 to 15 minutes, you can start requesting speaker rights. Make sure you raise your hands so my co-hosts know who to queue next. If we have time, we will also talk about two catalyst proposals from dcSpark. One about layer 3 scalability using ZK rollups, another one about bridging liquidity for top protocols. Both proposals are the ones that I think are very interesting for the audience here today. Don't worry, Seba is not here to show his proposals. He's here to share insights and knowledge about those. Now, with that said, let's get started. Sebastien, let's start with Milkomeda then. First question is from me. From a scale of 1 to 10, how happy would you say you are about the launch of Milkomeda so far?
Maybe a 7. So obviously, no launch will ever go perfect. We would like to launch with native token support. We would have liked to launch with NFT support, but the idea of Milkomeda has always been we want to grow the Cardano ecosystem as soon as possible, and so we want to launch as soon as possible. So we decided to launch V1, without native token support, without NFT support, and so obviously there are some features that were not there, but good news is we're still working on this. So we added native token support last week, and now because of that, you can get your wing riders some Ethereum tokens on native Cardano mainnet, and then we're going to be hopefully working on NFT support in the future, and that's one of our catalyst proposals as well.
I think you're being quite modest. I have used the bridge. It was quite smooth and very fast. I'm pretty happy with it. But okay, 7 sounds good, sounds decent. Always room for improvement, I guess. You mentioned wing riders, so just so happens one of the questions is about wing riders. I'm going to read that question to you now. WingRiders on their launch and for being the first to offer stablecoins such as USDC and USDT to the Cardano mainnet through the use of Milkomeda. So that's from WingRiders' announcement. Can you explain to us in simple language what does this mean?
Yeah, so it's really simple. So there's a lot of stablecoins in the crypto ecosystem, but unfortunately, a lot of them are not on Cardano at the moment. So for example, the large stablecoins are USDC, USDT, and UST, right? Those are like the three major ones in my opinion. And these coins are primarily USDT and USDC available on Ethereum, right? And Milkomeda has a bridge partnered with a company called Nomad to bridge tokens from Ethereum to Milkomeda, right? So remember, Milkomeda is a sidechain that runs EVM, and so it's compatible with these ERC20 assets. So thanks to that, when we had the Milkomeda launch, we launched with one of our launch partners was Nomad. So when Milkomeda launched, we had these stablecoins available on Milkomeda. So if you looked at dexes on Milkomeda, such as MilkySwap, they had USDT, USDC available from day one. Now, having these stablecoins on Milkomeda is great because it means that with your ADA, you can trade for stablecoins if you want and build on Milkomeda, but Milkomeda is still like an extra step, right? People who are Cardano users would have to onboard onto Milkomeda and then get their stablecoins, and it'd be great if you could have that as a single step available on Cardano through dexes on Cardano. And so what we did is we partnered with Vacuum Labs to basically build an ERC20 bridge, an ERC20 converter basically, to go from Milkomeda to Cardano. And so thanks to this bridge that was built in cooperation with them, you can convert ERC20 tokens from Milkomeda to Cardano. And so that's why if you get these USDC tokens on Cardano, you'll notice the name is Nomad USDC. And it's because these are USDCs that came from Ethereum, bridged to Nomad to Milkomeda, and then bridged again from Milkomeda to Cardano. Now, I know this is two steps, so being able to buy these tokens on Cardano CC, but if you want to add liquidity, like if you want to bring your USDC from Ethereum to Cardano, it's a two-step process because you have to go through Milkomeda. And there are projects that are working on abstracting this away from users so that it feels like a one-step process.
Right. So about this bridge, this question is also regarding the USDT, USDC bridge to Cardano. I haven't used it yet myself, so for this question, I'm going to rely on Seba. The question is it true that the USDT, USDC bridge to Cardano is private, only available to use by a few people?
So the goal is not to have it private. The goal is to make it public for available for everyone, because the feature of wrapping ERC20 tokens and converting them to Cardano, or the other way around from Cardano to Milkomeda, is something we want to have available to every person in every project. There's two limitations to this. One is, like I mentioned, no launch is perfect, so it's usually safest to launch with a small set of people that you know and you can communicate with if anything goes wrong. And so for this USDC bridge, because obviously if something goes wrong, it's high risk. Is that to bridge with limited set of tokens and with known partners that we have ways to contact, so that if anything goes wrong, we can easily rectify it, and then open up once we're sure everything is working smoothly. So that's limitation number one, which is like a coordination limitation, and we want to play it safe. And that's always been our thing in Milkomeda. We always want to play that safe as much as possible because there's a lot of money involved. And limitation number two is that when you want to bridge tokens, when you want to convert tokens from Cardano to Ethereum or the other way around, you can't just support every token in existence, because these tokens have to be tracked by the Milkomeda validators. And if you list every token, then somebody could DOS the operators by bridging a million tokens that have no real value, right? So there is going to be in the future some application process where if you have a token on Milkomeda or you have a token on Cardano, you can make an application to the Milkomeda validators, in which case they can decide to open a bridge for your specific token. Now, the bridge in existence is not just USDC and USDT. We also have Blues. We have, I'm trying to remember this, we have Husky. We have World Mobile Token, and I think one or two other ones. So we did not just launch with USDC and USDT. We launched with a few different tokens that we're familiar with the people who operate them, and we'll be opening this up more in the future.
Right. Sounds like it's mostly because of coordination and caution that you're not opening the stable pairing for most people or for all of us. That's interesting. Thanks for explaining that. A follow-up question to that is, and I quote, couldn't they have anticipated launching a private bridge was going to burn retail users who are buying these stables on Cardano?
I wouldn't necessarily say you're being burned. You're not forced to buy USDC or USDT. You can hold Cardano. So it's not like we're forcing anybody to go into stable coins. If you want to go into stable coins, you can do so. And obviously the fact that we had millions in liquidity was not enough is unfortunate. But once the bridge is open to everybody, we expect everything to kind of stable out. So, if you want to bridge and take the cost of bridging early because you think the price of Cardano is going to fall or whatever, that's up to you. But I would say it's not fair to say that this is somehow our protocol's fault that you want to make this kind of trade. If you want to say maybe there should be a bigger warning about the price of the trade or whatever, maybe that's a fair point. That would be a concern that you can raise to the Wing Riders team. But that's not something that we can do from the Milkometer perspective.
Right. Thank you very much for explaining that. Now, about this bridging, I got this one question from one of the listeners. How about bridging native assets back? Right now, people can bridge Milk and I believe WMT over to Milkomeda, but not back to Cardano. They did the same with ADA at the launch, and I wonder if they should put a disclaimer on Flint, which is also their product, when people want to bridge these tokens, that they can't bridge them back just yet. Just they need to provide a two-way bridge before letting people bridge tokens over.
Yeah, that's a fair remark. Unfortunately, we're trying to solve a lot of different things at the same time, and we're trying to launch these unwrapping experiences around the same time. So sometimes things that are supposed to launch one day after the other for a variety of reasons don't end up that way in practice. And so that's a coordination problem, like I mentioned, for these products. There's a lot of people from a lot of different companies trying to come together to make this possible, and sometimes things don't get released at the exact cadence you would have wanted to. So that's a fair complaint, and I take that.
All right, that makes sense. Totally understand that. Just a word for the audience. You guys can start requesting speaker rights now and ask any questions to Sebastien about Milkomeda or dcSpark. We have about half an hour left, so you guys take the chance. Sebastien, can you tell us a bit about the Milkometer Accelerator?
Yeah, so one thing our company's had a lot of experience with since our founders were previously working at Emergo was accelerating projects. So at Emergo, we used to have an accelerator called D-Lab, and Nico, who's one of our co-founders, has also a lot of experience with accelerators before his experience at Emergo, and another one of our C-level executives, Kara, who's also on this call, also has experience with a lot of accelerators. And so it made sense for us to partner with SOSV, which is a large accelerator program accelerator company in the US, to launch a Milkometer Accelerator. At the end of the day, why did we release Milkometer? Well, it's because we wanted to bring more developers, right? Not every developer knows Plutus, and so people who are developers who know Solidity should be able to come to the Cardano ecosystem as well. And now we have the technical solution, right, which is Milkomeda, but the technical solution is not enough. You also need to bring the people. And so this Milkometer Accelerator is to find the people, empower them, get their product to market, and then bring that to the Cardano ecosystem.
Right, makes sense. Thank you. I got a question from in the DMs. So it's about the timeline to move away from a native script for the Milkometer bridge and move to an optimistic bridge.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's hard to give a concrete timeline because it doesn't solely depend on us. It also depends on IoT. The reason we didn't move to layer 2 solution from day one is because Plutus just doesn't have the functionality required to do that properly yet. And a lot of that will come with the Vassal hard fork. So that'll introduce a lot of the Plutus features that we're missing. So we need to wait until the Vassal hard fork features are settled and implemented, and we have all the tools required to start this. Reason number 2 is that as people have experienced in the past few months, Cardano has its own kind of scalability issue, right? And if you have a layer 2 solution, you need to settle the state on the main net. And if Cardano has a system where there's no transaction fee and transactions may sometimes take an hour or 2 hours to go through, it means that the layer 2 state may be unable to properly advance for an hour or two, which is not a great experience from a security perspective or a user experience perspective. So that was the other issue. And the Basel hard fork introduces some performance improvements. They may have a tiered fee system at some point that Milkomeda could take advantage of to make sure the state gets updated fast enough. And after the Basel hard fork later this year, they have other scalability improvements planned. So those were the two main things that we were waiting for.
About scalability, I want to tap a bit into that. That's also regarding one of your proposals titled Layer 3 Scalability Using ZK Rollups. So before we even dive into that, can you explain to us, first of all, what is ZK Rollups? And second, what do you mean by Layer 3 scalability?
Yeah, sure. So for people who don't know, there's a popular concept in blockchains right now called Layer 2, which is a scalability technique where the security of your new system is equivalent to the security of the mainnet. So for example, we could get this Milkomeda sidechain to become a layer 2, and it would make Milkomeda as secure as Cardano. And the way this happens is that every time something happens on the Milkomeda chain, we post the state to the Cardano network. And so just by syncing your datelist, your full node, you would automatically also be syncing the full history of the Milkomeda chain. And therefore, you don't even have to look at Milkomeda to know the transaction history and the state of the network and know that everything was processed in an honest manner. So it basically takes the security of Cardano and reuses that for the security of your sidechain. Now, this is a popular technique in other blockchains, and Cardano is working on this technology as well. But to implement this, there's multiple ways you can do it. One of the common ways is called optimistic rollups. Another way is called ZK rollups. So ZK rollups is one of the more promising ones because it uses zero-knowledge proofs for data compression, which means that you can take your state of your blockchain that's, for example, in this case, Milkomeda, compress it using zero-knowledge proofs, and then add that to the Cardano mainnet so that the verification can be done somewhat efficiently and does not take much data. Now, zero-knowledge proofs is still very much an area of active research. And so there's some concerns about the size of these proofs, concerns about the validation time of these proofs. But all these are hard, although hard problems. There are problems that large companies of 2-digit, 3-digit number of employees are working on. And so we can bring these zero-knowledge rollups to Cardano directly, right? So you can have Milkomeda, which will not be a zero-knowledge rollup, but you can also have other projects deploy layer 2s to Cardano that use these zero-knowledge proofs. But as I mentioned, technically speaking, these are very hard problems, right? And as I mentioned, there's companies with hundreds of people that are working on these tough problems, but they're doing it in the Ethereum space, right? And we could go to these companies and say, hey, you have a large project, and we'd love for you to deploy on Cardano. And they'll say we can't. Not necessarily because they don't want to, but because Cardano works totally different from Ethereum, which is what they've been building for, right? So even if they're interested in building for Cardano, to deploy on Cardano, they'd have to redesign the whole system. So what we want to be able to pitch to them is say like, hey, look, you have this really promising zero-knowledge roll-up solution. You're deploying to Ethereum, where although your company is large in size, you also have a lot of competition. There's many companies trying to work on this. You could get access to more users, a higher market share if you deployed in the Cardano ecosystem. We know you can't deploy to Cardano mainnet because it works totally differently from Ethereum. What you can do is you can deploy it to Milkomeda and use Milkomeda as a compatibility layer. So by deploying to Milkomeda, which will also be a layer 2 system, you'll effectively be a layer 3, and you'll chain the mainnet Cardano security from Cardano to Milkomeda and Milkomeda to their solution. And so their layer 3 will inherit Cardano's safety features. And thanks to the compatibility brought by Milkomeda, they'll be able to deploy without making any changes to their protocol. So this is a way to basically tap into these large companies in Ethereum space and try and convince them to come over and bring all their technological work they've done to the Cardano ecosystem.
There's a lot to unpack here. So my first follow-up question would be, what does it mean when you say zero knowledge? Why is it important to have zero knowledge proof?
Yeah, so this is kind of a common misconception. And so actually a lot of people talk about changing the name from ZK rollups to something else. Because when people hear zero knowledge proofs, they think, oh, like they're using zero knowledge proofs to make the transactions anonymous or something like that. That's actually not what zk rollups are doing. The transactions are not anonymized in any way, but it's actually using these techniques for compression, so that you can compress the state when you do these state updates to the mainnet, and the proofs that you end up submitting can be proved in a relatively fast manner, and convincingly be proved that the state is correct. So unlike optimistic rollups, where it can take a while where you have to wait for a challenge period, with zero knowledge proofs, you can convince yourself of the truth of these succinct proofs right away. So I know this is like a very technical explanation, but the key takeaway is that when you hear zk rollup, zero knowledge rollup, you should not be thinking zero knowledge like privacy. It has nothing to do with privacy. This is just one technique of rollups where the validation time is faster and faster finality than you would get from other approaches like optimistic rollups.
So is it true, is it accurate to say that the verification efficiency is the biggest advantage of zk rollups as opposed to optimized rollups, or is there other advantages as well, such as security?
Yeah, the verification speed is the main benefit, because with optimistic rollups, what you need to do is, if you're, for example, like let me describe with Milkomeda, so you have a concrete example. If you had an optimistic rollup for Milkomeda and you want to go from Milkomeda back to Cardano, you usually have to wait about a week or two. And the reason why is because there's a challenge period where, although you did an unwrap transaction, it could be that you're unwrapping tokens that you don't actually own, like you faked the information. And so you need to wait a week or two to wait for a challenge period for anybody to submit like a fraud proof. And this is not a great user experience, but it's much more efficient and much simpler than what a zk rollup does. So the zk rollup, once you post the state to the Cardano mainnet, it will be validated and approved right away. So now the unwrap experience is almost instant. The problem is that, technically speaking, this is a much more challenging solution, and zero knowledge proofs are still a very new technology, relatively speaking. And so if there's a mistake in the implementation of these new protocols, it may lead to a problem with the bridge, which causes people to lose their money. So that's why you hear a lot of people say that these zk rollups are kind of like the main approach to use in the future, but a lot of people are hesitant to use them now just because of the complexity of the implementation and the cryptography involved.
And how far has dcSpark gone in terms of the research for this zk rollup on Cardano? You mentioned earlier that most research existing are being done on Ethereum. So is dcSpark spearheading this kind of research?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the reason that we're trying to reach out to zero knowledge protocols, rollup protocols on Ethereum is because we don't plan to do this for Cardano ourselves, right? So what we're focusing on is Milkomeda, which is not meant to work as a zk rollup or an optimistic rollup. And I can explain to you why in a minute. But so we're not focusing on these approaches. And so what we want to do is be able to go to projects in the Ethereum space that are focusing on these solutions and bring them over to the Cardano ecosystem. So that's what we're kind of focusing on right now. The reason why we're not doing this ourselves is because these techniques, optimistic rollups and zk rollups, are meant to go from EVM to EVM, right? You go from one EVM chain to another. And so, for example, if you imagine Optimism and Arbitrum, these are like two of the main layer 2s on Ethereum. These are both EVM platforms. They're Ethereum-based platforms. So they're going from one Ethereum chain to another Ethereum chain. And so these systems are designed with going from the same system to another protocol that runs the same system, which is not what we're doing, right? We're going from EVM to Cardano, and so these techniques don't apply to us. This is, if you want to put it maybe in different perspective, that might be easier to understand for Cardano users. Cardano has a different layer 2 solution called Hydra. Hydra is not an optimistic rollup. It's not a zk rollup. It's a state channel. So it's a totally different kind of scalability solution. But the way Hydra was designed is that it's meant to go from Cardano to Cardano. When you run a Hydra state channel, you have access to Pluto smart contracts. You have access to the Cardano UTXO set. So if you hear the word isomorphic, it's like maybe sometimes you hear that from Charles. What it means is that you're going from Cardano to Cardano. So somebody from the Ethereum space came in and said, hey, I really like what you guys did with Hydra, I'd like for you to deploy it on Ethereum. It's not possible because Hydra is designed to go from Cardano to Cardano. You can't just replace one side from Cardano to Ethereum and hope it'll just work. And so the same way, these ZK rollups, optimistic rollups were made from Ethereum to Ethereum. And so you can't just like bring them over to Cardano and hope it'll just work, because Cardano works completely differently. And so that's why we're pitching to these people to use Milkomeda as the compatibility layer. And for Milkomeda, we have a separate solution that we've been looking into that we're hoping will still have the same security guarantees that you expect from a layer 2 rollup, but will work slightly differently.
Right. Thanks for explaining that. We do have News with his hand up. News, do you have a question for Sebastien?
Hey, yeah, what's up, Sebastien? I just wanted to say thank you so much. As an everyday user of Cardano, your work has been really inspiring and amazing to be a part of, from your work at Emergo up until now with everything going on at dcSpark. My question, I was curious to know more about the NFTs that you mentioned when you gave yourself the rating of a 7 in hopes that you'd have NFT support. I was curious if you could elaborate on that, and then also perhaps speak to what areas of mobile development you're most excited about.
Yeah, sure. So for NFT support, currently it's not possible with the ERC20 converter we have. So the name kind of gives it away. It's an ERC20 converter. It's not the NFT converter, which is a different standard. So for people who don't know Ethereum, ERC20 is equivalent to like a Cardano native token. ERC721 is the equivalent to an NFT. So if ERC NFT, this is the same thing as ERC721. If you're a Cardano native token, this is kind of the equivalent to ERC20. So when we have this ERC20 converter, it allows us to bridge over ERC20 tokens like stable coins, stuff like World Mobile Token, Hosky. These tokens are all ERC20-like, which means that they're fungible token, right? And the infrastructure we have right now does not support non-fungible tokens, aka NFTs like CNFTs or ERC721 tokens. And so we have an idea of how we can support these NFTs as well, but we had to deprioritize this feature for the initial release, and we're pitching to the community to get some extra funding to work on these, but unfortunately we had to drop this from V1. If you're wondering concretely, when would you like to use this? One example that I think is pretty showing is that SpaceBuds, famous Cardano NFT, recently had an auction for one of their NFTs. They wanted to have an auction contract, but currently on Cardano, there's no audited auction contract. So doing it on Cardano would have been kind of a risk. Fortunately, on Ethereum, there's many audited kind of auction contracts. And basically what they're able to do is take a Solidity smart contract and deploy it to Milkomeda, right? And then run the auction on Milkomeda. And so thanks to this, they're now able to use an audited smart contract and not have to worry about the safety risk. One problem they do have is, imagine you win the auction on Milkomeda, how do you now claim your SpaceBuds, which lives on Cardano, right? You're missing the bridge for the NFT. And so their solution was, okay, whoever wins the auction, Barry, who runs SpaceBuds, will personally send you the NFT, which means you have to trust him for the auction, which is not a big deal in this case because, people trust him. He's a known person in the Cardano ecosystem and so on. But it does show a limitation that it would have been nice if you win the auction, you automatically receive the NFT. But because we didn't have this NFT bridge in place, this was not possible. And that's why we think that adding this feature to Bridge NFT as well will be able to unlock use cases like this.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for working in that regard. I think it's so promising to think about the alignments between different projects and different chains. There's some speakers coming up who I think will have some more amazing questions. I was curious to know real quick, just to follow up, about mobile development with Flint Wallet and dcSpark. Kind of what's cooking on your kitchen on that end?
Yeah, so we are looking to have mobile support for Milkomeda is the main thing that we want to have. And so currently we're working on Flint Mobile. We have a kind of proof of concept ready, and we're just fixing up some of the UI UX issues, but hopefully we'll have Flint Mobile already. And then we'll be focusing on Flint Mobile support for Milkomeda. Now as we're doing all this, we'll obviously be looking into app support for Cardano as well on mobile. And so that's definitely on our radar as well. But there's other people also looking into doing this. And so what is the kind of main value proposition Flint brings to the ecosystem? Obviously, other than all the open source development work that we do for all the tooling for Flint, and we make all free and open source for everybody else to use. The other value that we want to add is compatibility, right? We want to bring more people to the Cardano ecosystem, and since that's kind of what we think is the main value out of our wallet, we do want to focus on Milkomeda Mobile, and so we're also seeking for funding for this as well.
That's so awesome to hear. Thank you so much for those amazing answers. We have Hearts, Lord of Dogtown, who joined us as a speaker as well. I think has some questions. What's up, Hearts?
Yeah, g'day. Sebastian, I was just wondering, I know that you're planning on bringing EVM capabilities to Solana as well. Is that going to be something that is going to be on Milkomeda and will be able to interact with tokens from Cardano and that network as well on Milkomeda, like swaps directly across those networks through what you're doing with dcSpark?
Yeah, good question. So the current Milkomeda deployment, you may have seen, is called Milkomeda C1. C1 stands for Cardano deployment number 1. And so the reason we call it C1 is because we may have different deployments on Cardano in the future. For example, if people want to have like a different smart contract platform, like Solana, for example, uses Rust-based smart contracts. If people want to bring Rust-based smart contracts to Cardano, we could have a Milkomeda C2. There's also a Milkomeda protocol, but runs with Rust-based smart contracts. So that's why we named it that way. And the reason we have seen the name is because we want to deploy Milkomeda to other chains as well, right? So for example, for Solana, it would be Milkomeda S1. Now the Solana deployment, which is the one that you mentioned, is going to be an entirely new chain. And so Milkomeda C1 will be entirely separate from Milkomeda S1. There's no overlap between these. However, because they'll both be running EVM and we have bridge partners, we'll be able to bridge these together so that you can easily bring your Cardano native token to C1, bridge it over to S1, and then from S1 to Solana. And so this will give you access to exposure to Solana. So from Cardano, you can bring your tokens all the way to Solana and have people trade them on Solana dexes. But this will be through multiple hops, not like reusing a single chain. The other thing I want to mention through this is that, as I mentioned, Flint is hoping to be the kind of wallet that ties together the whole Milkomeda ecosystem. And so that's what we're focusing on, interoperability. And so the idea is through Flint Wallet, you'll be able to interact with all these tokens in a fairly seamless manner. So if you have like a Cardano native token, you'll be able to fairly smoothly just move it on to Solana if you want to, and then interact with Solana smart contracts all from the same wallet, all with the same tokens, and not really have to know so much under the hood about all these bridges and hops you're doing.
Yeah, sounds really cool. Do you ever foresee a time when, like someone brought up before about with the bridges that are sort of like two hops at the moment, the ability to sort of make that in one hop from a user experience standpoint?
Yeah, so definitely we want to lower the amount of hops for security reasons, because the more hops you do, the more risk you have. So like an example, everybody knows, I think maybe it's too old by now, the wormhole hack that happened. So wormhole is a popular bridge. They got hacked. They lost all the funds associated with the protocol. And so these bridge hacks are not too common, but there's a risk that they happen, right? So if you're interacting through a protocol by using multiple bridges, every time you use a bridge, you're adding to the risk, right? And so usually you want to minimize the number of hops that you need to do. And one of the main ways that people are trying to avoid these hops is by doing systems like Layer 2 scalability solutions, because like I mentioned, through Layer 2 solutions, you can reuse the security of the base chain, which is not quite the same model that you usually get with a bridge. And so some bridges are also kind of reusing these security models and trying to reuse some of these properties. And Nomad is one of these bridges, which is why we partnered with them, because we think they have better security trade-offs than some of the other bridges out there. But definitely trying to minimize the number of hops is kind of a security concern. We're definitely going to try our best to, provide direct bridges when possible instead of going through multiple hops. And we have some partners that are trying to do this, which is partially what I mentioned with the RC20 converter in the past. Right now it's 2 hops. We're hoping to work with partners to bring that down to 1. And we think there's also a possibility to leverage some other solutions like Hydra. For example, if you have a layer 3 on Milkomeda, you want to go back to Cardano, it's 2 hops. You go from L3 to L2, L2 to L1, right? So you got to do 2 hops. One thing that would be interesting is if we deploy a Hydra state channel where you can provide liquidity to some non-liquid provider on Cardano. And then if you want to go from layer 3 back to layer 1 without having to wait for the validation period, you could go through this liquidity provider that you would push something to a smart contract on the layer 3, and then they would give you your liquidity back on layer 1 through a hydro state channel, which finalizes much faster. So these are kind of interesting combinations of multiple different solutions out there. They're very much interested in looking into. But unfortunately, Hydra is not quite there yet. But obviously, the team's doing a lot of work. But if we have and also these are not cheap either to figure out all the R&D really to this. But if things work out and if people are interested in this, we're more than happy to look into how we can combine these different scale-based solutions together to provide not only a seamless user experience, but also to provide fast UX for users.
Yeah, it seems like you've got a lot of foresight here into scaling and to building this into something that's just going to be a really smooth experience. So yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch. I'm glad it's launched smoothly up to here. So congratulations, Sebastien.
Yeah, thank you. And one disclaimer I want to make, like as I'm talking about these, I know these sound like exciting ideas, but they're complicated, and these will take months to build out, even just prove the concepts of these. So I know you may be super excited from this Twitter space, but unfortunately, Rome was not built in a day. If Dumpling will allow me one shill, we are hiring a dcSpark. So if anybody's listening to this and wants to help make it possible, definitely go look at our career page.
Yeah, cool. I work in software for a bank, so I know how slow these things can go and how much thought has to be put into them when you're dealing with people's money. But yeah, you come across as someone that's really knowledgeable, and it is really cool to see. So I'm really hoping that great things happen here.
Thank you.
Amazing question, Hearts. Thank you so much. We have another speaker, Microproofs, coming up, and I just wanted to be cognizant of time because we're wrapping the space up, and we only have a few more moments, so we'll have time for probably one more question. And Micro, welcome. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Hey, Sebastien. So I had a question on the ADA that's locked under the Milkomeda on the Cardano side. I wasn't sure on this, but are you guys planning on having sort of voting to be able to delegate that ADA stake, or maybe you have multiple smart contracts that would lock, so you have be able to delegate to multiple different pools? I was just wondering on the sort of plans on that side.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the first version of Milkomeda, we didn't want people to have any kind of security concerns, and so we decided to use enterprise addresses for Milkomeda v1. For people who don't know, enterprise addresses cannot stake the ADA, and they cannot vote with the ADA. So all of this is just pure ADA and won't be reused for anything. Because we thought it's probably best to just launch with this. And we do want to allow people to continue earning staking rewards while using Milkomeda. And we have thought recently about delegation permissions for Catalyst voting through Milkomeda as well. Some of these both these are kind of technically hard. We do have a idea of how we're going to allow for staking rewards for Milkomeda users. And we have the technical specification for how we want to do this, but we haven't had the time to build it yet. But hopefully we'll be able to do this so that just like you get staking rewards while using some protocols on ADA, we'll be able to keep earning staking rewards while using protocols on Milkomeda is our goal. We just need to build this out. For the delegation for voting, this also is kind of tricky because I think from a technical perspective, it's easier from our side. But the Catalyst team doesn't have support for delegating your vote to script addresses. So Catalyst is not allowed delegating your vote to DAOs or things like that at the moment. And so we won't be able to do this for Fund 8 or Fund 9. Fund 10, they may have this capability. But even if Cardano has the capability to delegate your voting power to a DAO, which I think they should because that would unlock a lot of cool use cases, we still haven't launched the Milkomeda DAO. And so probably we need to also think about whether or not we want to launch the Milkomeda DAO before being able to delegate the ADA or how all that would work. So this one has some technical limitations and also some philosophical limitations.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it. Thanks for answering.
Right. Before we wrap up the space, I'm going to cue my other co-host, Reese from Stoic Pool. Do you have any question for Sebastien before we end?
Hey, I did actually have one. Actually, thank you for saying that, Dumpling. Sebastian, I appreciate everything that you do for Cardano and everything you've done, but I had a question about the actual proposal for the ZK rollups. So I'm looking at it, and I've learned more about what you're doing and what you want to do from this talk rather than what I've learned from the proposal. There isn't a lot of information on there. Is there a link or somewhere that we can actually read more about it? Like, do you have like a blog post or something like that that will actually talk through everything that you're trying to do with the ZK rollups, the layer 3 scalability stuff, like how you're approaching other developers and other companies and stuff? Because there isn't really a lot of information on the proposal itself.
Yeah, this is a good question. This is a long-running problem with dcSpark that we're trying to address. The problem is that we have a lot of catalyst proposals. Like for Fund 7, we had maybe like 7 or 8. For Fund 8, I think we have like 18 or something. And every proposal takes quite a while to both write, and also takes a lot of time to write the monthly updates and keep the community updated. And we've tried in the past to hire like dedicated grant community managers, treasury managers, these kinds of positions for people to be fully dedicated to making sure these proposals have all the technical details included and make sure we have, proper updates for all the work that we're doing. But we just haven't been able to find somebody to kind of take this position, unfortunately. And so we're trying to do the best we can with the people we have. But, as you can imagine, it's hard to balance building the protocol vs also writing about the work you're doing and also writing about future work for grants. So we're trying our best to kind of balance all these. And I know that our CAS proposals, unfortunately, due to time limitations, do not have as much depth as they should. And I know that, for all these proposals, we've done months of work on, but have not done as great a job of updating the community about the work as we do it. And we are trying to tackle these problems as best as we can with the staff we have. And if you're kind of interested in this, we are also hiring, technical writers and these kinds of positions that you can also apply for and help us make sure that all these proposals have all the depth that they need and that we get proper updates to the community as well.
Yeah, maybe that'd be something that I might give you a message about, and we try and figure something out, because I just want to know more about it. I just want to, like listening to you talk about it explains so much, and like everything is just like a half or one sentence answer on the actual proposal. So even though I'd seen it, I didn't have any real like information on what was going on. But thank you for clarifying that, and I completely agree. It's so much work writing proposals.
Yeah, and this is the problem, that a lot of these proposals are very technical. So to get somebody to write like a proper in-depth like blog post about this, it would be like me or Robert Kornacki or Nico to write something. But we also have like all these millions of other things that we have to do with our time, so it's hard to balance all of this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you, Sebastian, just for the clarity there.
Thank you for the space, Sebastian. And don't worry about the shilling. You weren't shilling anything. You were asking for talents that also can help build Cardano. And I'm sure we can appreciate that. And to all the people in the space, if you build an amazing bridge like Milkomeda, you get a shill quota in Dumpling Space too, but for hiring people. Shout out to Seva. Every time I talk to you, I just burn extra calories because my brain is put to high intensity interval work. We're learning so much every time we talk to you. And also on behalf of the community, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate that. So best of luck to dcSpark, to Milkomeda, to all your proposals. I hope you find great writers, technical writers to write the proposals for you. And keep doing the amazing work that you're already doing. Shout out to Carol also for making the space arrangement possible. And shout out to everybody in the space today. I see that you're all learning, and thanks to my lovely co-hosts and the best listeners. Thanks for coming. Take care. Don't lose your seed phrase, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, Sebastian.
Yeah, thanks everyone.